We talked about dominance and social rank a little bit, where I said that I think very few dogs out there are truly dominant dogs, the dog that really thinks they're in charge of the world. And the truly dominant dogs tend not to be aggressive dogs for the most part because they're so confident. They will occasionally express aggression very strongly if you're trying to force them to do something they don't think they need to do and don't want to do. But usually those dogs are not aggressive unless you're trying to force them to do something. They don't feel threatened by normal everyday situations because they're so self-confident frequently. Many dogs have aspects of dominant aggression, but these are the dogs that I call, again, socially upwardly mobile. They're opportunistically dominant, meaning they'll try something and see if they get away with it, and if it works, then they'll do it more, and they'll attempt to take control of the situation. So, like Debbie's dog, and she said the dog would, when the dog was young, the dog would growl at her or try to bite her when she tried to get it off the couch or whatever. But the dog is not dominant. The dog is very easy to convince that that's a bad idea. So you correct the dog a little bit, and she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yikes!" Right? So she's very easily dissuaded from that stance. But she's not. She's willing to try. So she's socially upwardly mobile-minded enough to give it a shot and see if it's going to work for her, right? And in some that's why people like pet dog people frequently create social rank problems with their dogs, because the first time their dog growls at them, they go, "Oh my God, my dog growled at me," right? And next thing you know, the dog's like, "Ha, I got you right where I want you. If I don't want to do something, just growl or just bite you or whatever." And they create these things. But those dogs, in my opinion, were not dominant dogs, because if somebody had even done a modicum of correcting them for that initial behavior, they would have stopped immediately. Like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I was just checking. Did you really mean I had to get off the couch," right? So, and a lot of behavior, and the reason I don't like all the dominance talk is that it's way overused. People use it to explain everything around dogs, you know, and to the point where it becomes a detriment. And a lot of bad stuff has been done to dogs who are not truly dominant because people were perceiving dominant signals, right? "Ooh, look, a dog put his paw on your leg. He's trying to get on top of you. He's trying to dominate you," right? All that kind of stuff happens constantly. Anything the dog does. And then people are alpha rolling their dogs and pinning them down and all kinds of crazy stuff like that, right? Which is mostly unproductive.
A dog that is truly dominant, would that be then an undesirable characteristic of
Yes.
a working dog?
Yeah, because you won't be able to train them.
I want to do that.
You won't be able to train them. Because they're not going to give up the fight. They're not going to finally say you're in charge. Now, sometimes we can manipulate them, and I know some of those dogs that have gone on to compete, but they very rarely win and do well, because what happens is if I can manipulate the hierarchy of the things that they want, then I can control behavior. They're doing things to get to something that they want, and as long as they think that, they're great. But as soon as you run up against something that they don't want to do, and they've decided that they don't feel like doing it, no amount of pressure from you is going to make them do it, because the truly dominant dog never really gives up in his head. Like, so even if you beat him senseless and electrocute him afterwards, he's still going to think, "I'm still in charge," that you won the battle, but you haven't won the war. And he's going to come back for you again, right? So those dogs are just too hard to train at some point when they resist, right? So the really dominant dog is a dog that you go, you know, cool, just hang out. Maybe you breed him. Right? You say, like, great, because you're not, again, like we talked about breeding a little bit anecdotally over the course of the week, and how you kind of breed over what you want, knowing you're not going to get a whole bunch of dogs like that. So that assertiveness that comes with that and that confidence can frequently be a great thing. But a really, truly dominant dog is a pain in the neck to train. Right? They're great as long as you're not trying to force them to do something. And if they're getting what they want, great. If they're not, then they can be very intractable, and it's hard then to put them into avoidance. Absolutely. So I want a dog that thinks that he can beat the decoy, but I don't want a dog that thinks he can beat me too and everybody else on the planet. Right? I want the dog that thinks he can beat his adversary out there in protection work. I want him to be subordinate to me, ideally, to be willing to take a subordinate role to me, and willing to thinks that he or she can dominate the decoy or the bad guy or whoever else in the world, right? So I would a dog that thinks they're dominant over everybody but me as the handler can frequently be a great and very functional dog in terms of protection circles, right? But a dog that really thinks they're the number one creature on the planet, that's rough. That's sort of undesirable for training. But there's confidence things that come with that, right? So those dogs, in my opinion, would probably be valuable to keep around. Keep around as a breeding type dog because of the confidence that tends to come with that, knowing